Good morning. It's Pop again, Dennis Murray. Uh, it's another beautiful day here in Maryland. Going to be a little hot and humid, but I sat outside this morning and had my morning coffee with the birds and the squirrels and the chipmunks and the cicadas are here, which is a happy thing for me. Love to listen to the sound of them. It always reminds me of August, my birthday and month, and it also reminds me very much of the area in France called Provence, where Gail and I were blessed to have many happy uh, times over the years. And so, I also wanted to mention that yesterday was the 11th, and it was my mother's birthday. She was born in 1906, so she'd be 114. She lived into her 80s, and she had a wonderful life. My father and she also celebrated their anniversary on the 11th. They were married on her birthday. And for some years, she was a bit sensitive about her age in her 50s and 60s and really 70s. We used to say happy anniversary and that other thing. And so she turned 80 in 1986. And she decided she was very happy about it. And she wanted to celebrate big time. And there was no more hiding from age. She was proud of it. My dad was buried on the day of their 62nd wedding anniversary. And we asked my mom when he died if she wanted us to move his burial up a day or back a day so it wouldn't coincide with her anniversary. And she said, no, I think that's a pretty good day for it. And so there you have it. Some people have been blessed so many times in so many ways. And my parents were blessed with each other, and I was blessed with them. They had many, many faults, um, but there was a huge amount of love. And I personally think what a parent has to do is awaken a child to his or her own self. So, and you do that by loving them. And I think all the rest is just details. And my parents very much awakened me to my own self, for which I'm eternally grateful. Not every parent knows to do that or tries to do that or succeeds. Um, so I want to continue with a couple of more things that I opened the door to yesterday. I want to talk more about that banner because it's connected to spirituality, and that's connected to the Great Divide. I want to develop that a little bit later. But I wanted to start first by developing more about the stupid, uh, the incomplete, profound mistake that we all make by seeing those who disagree with us as stupid, and that it's a key part of the Great Divide. And um, my premise yesterday, I developed to some extent, so I'm not going to push that a lot more. But I want to give more examples because my daughter Betsy continually points out, all my kids do really, that examples make my generalized points a lot richer and more useful. So just a quick recap, my point was that when I feel that people on the other side of the divide are stupid, I engaging in a kind of type bias. That a part of it is that there's nature's wisdom uh, uh, causes us to have differences in our openness. Some of us are more open and others less so. Um, and that type bias takes the difference that's characteristic of one side of the Great Divide, my side, which is, sort of in love with openness, and looks at the other side and essentially, poops on them because they're not like we are. And it's a complete, profound failure to appreciate nature's wisdom, and it's harmful, very, very harmful. And it's completely understandable why we all do that. Um, but sometimes the things that are most important are pretty obvious. They're plain as the nose on your face, and they're just hard to see. It's taken me an awful lot of decades of really hard work to see this. And I think that it sounds pretty obvious, but it really does call all of us to behave quite differently in our hearts and in our thoughts about each other. So, enough for the general theory. So, more examples. So, yesterday morning, I was reading a Facebook post. I don't make any bones about it, how much I like Facebook, because I'm old and I don't see my friends as much as I would like to, of course, because of the coronavirus, but I haven't seen as much of them as I would like to in recent years because it's a little harder for all of us to get out and about these days. And, some of us have health issues. You know, um, some are just getting old and tired, and of course, some have passed on. Well, I went to the weddings of all of my dear friends' kids, and now they all have grandkids, most of them. So my friends and I all have great grandkids, and I've been blessed to have friends going back, 50 years. The Dedricks and the Hardys and the Franks and the Keelers were close to that, and um, the Millers were, Hardy family people, um, and you know, Ginger Fagan, Ellie Minoski. I mean, Phil and Mary Ellen Donnelly. I've known these people for 50 years or so, and they have enriched my life incredibly. Um, and I know, so I get to see their lives, their grandkids and great grandkids' lives on Facebook, and I'm very appreciative of it. So I was looking at Facebook yesterday morning, and here's a post in which someone was speaking about that they feel that idiots should shut up. Now, that's not how it was phrased. It included some more colorful language, but that was the gist of it. Uh, and I think that that's exactly what we're talking about. That, in all honesty, I don't remember who put this up, and I don't know which side of the Great Divide they are on, but I vaguely recall thinking they're more on my side than the other. But believe me, we see a sense that the other side's an idiot coming from both sides. Let's face it. But the point being that this kind of thinking, this kind of feeling being celebrated is celebrating something that we should instead try to see is harmful and is not wise, is not respecting nature's wisdom or applying it, and that is something we should in fact avoid. That um, just as the hate mongers are on both sides. And of course, each side thinks that their people are not hate mongers, they're truth tellers. Um, but those, lovely, wonderful people on my side can be just as angry and hateful towards the other side as vice versa. So I think that this is an example. The simple phrase, you've heard it 1,000 times, you've seen it 1,000 times about, people who are stupid should shut up and people who are idiots should shut up. Um, I don't know how many times I approached a toll booth and the toll collector, of course, in the days before we had electronic devices to pay our tolls for us, you actually had to stop in the toll booth and give the money to somebody. I don't know how many times I approached the toll booth and the person taking the money was being a bit slow. Maybe they'd been on the job for 5 or 6 hours already. And so they weren't rushing to get the money thrown in the drawer and, giving you your receipt or whatever, um, or your change. Maybe they were being a bit deliberate about it. Or maybe they were slow and they were slow when they just started work 5 minutes ago. Some people are just slower than others. Good Lord knows I hate to read recipes and I cook for myself, of course, because, you know, Gail's in her care facility now. Um, so, the recipe says, I do like to cook real meals pretty regularly, most of the days of the week, because I think it's good for you and keeps you, you celebrate life. I've been blessed. It hurts a bit to be cooking for one. I miss her, but it's inappropriate to throw away the rest of your life because of this loss. So, and of course, I've got all these kids and grandkids and great grandkids and weddings and christenings and all this good, wonderful stuff to enjoy. So I cook for myself and I live life with a certain amount of joy. And but you read the recipe and it says 8 minutes prep time, and 38 minutes later, I'm just what you can do. You have to laugh at yourself. And so the whole thing about idiots. So I was finishing about the toll booth. I don't know how many times I've approached the toll booth. Uh, I don't know where the cooking came from. We're just going to let that go. So we're back to the toll booth. So I'm approaching the toll booth, and I don't know how many times I have said gum chewing slut. Honestly, out loud, to myself, out loud to myself. That's kind of stupid, isn't it? But, you know, before I got to the toll booth, while I was unhappy about what looked like a pretty slow toll booth collector to me, that phrase would often be said, and such that the grandkids who were often with me in the car always laugh about popping his gum chewing sluts. Now, how stupid is that? If you take it literally, um, there's no connection to any of this to this person in the toll booth. It could have been a man. It didn't have to be a woman. Could or not be chewing gum. Who knew? Who cared? I can't tell. It was just a phrase that was rude and offensive and essentially came from my perception that everybody should do everything the way I think they should. Though I myself, oh yeah, that's where the cooking came in. I failed to do things quickly. And, but, somehow you're supposed to, in all matters of your life in dealing with me, you're supposed to be really quick and fast and take the 8 minutes prep time like the cookbook says and not the 28 minutes that I need. It's ridiculous, but it's rooted deep in our souls. It's just foolishness, but it's a very deeply rooted foolishness. It's hard to see as such And it's hard to, you don't root out your soul. You just root out things that are deep inside you. You come to appreciate them differently. You can't stop these thoughts coming to mind. You just spot them with practice, and you chuckle over your having these, mistaken thoughts. They're part of the human condition, and that's sometimes funny. Um, and in so doing, you take away the sting from them. You disarm them. You know, when you can laugh at yourself and laugh at your own faults, then you're not wallowing in your faults. And so much of the harm, much of the barb is gone out of this fault, though it continues. Um, you know, um, more examples. We've all heard the phrase, so and so doesn't tolerate fools. It's often said about some brilliant teacher or some brilliant business leader, somebody who's really, really clever and achieved, and he's a group leader. And boy, you better not be foolish or say anything foolish or do anything foolish because you're going to get reamed out. They used to say that about a lot of people that I thought were pretty good people. And I guess if they said it about him, it was probably true. I remember they said that about Hubert Humphrey. He was a pretty smart guy. He knew a lot of stuff. If you appeared before his committee and gave him testimony that showed you hadn't really dug deeply into what you were talking about, or you just weren't adequately intellectual in the sense of the kind of global intelligence that people test high IQ with. And then he had this reputation. He didn't tolerate fools. Well, I just thought that was, like, wow, okay, gee, I'm all for it. But, the older I get, the more I realize, no, that's part of this whole package where we are failing to appreciate nature's wisdom. It's built deep in us to have all of these ideas that people that are somewhat different from us um, or somehow stupid or foolish, or are not to be tolerated. This is just not correct. Um, and more examples, more phrases. One of them is the phrase "a vast wasteland" describing television. It was used publicly by a person named Newton Minow, who was at the time, I think, either the chairman or the retired chairman of the federal, whatever the people are. It's not Federal Trade Commission. The people that regulate television in general. It might be the FTC. I don't remember. Um, I'm old and I'm feeling particularly stupid at this moment. I think it's okay for me to laugh about me being stupid because if I didn't, I'd have to shoot myself. That I'm pretty stupid pretty often, and I just got to chuckle about it. But and I think that's okay because I think that's a recognition that um, nature's wisdom hasn't penetrated any too deeply into me, and that I'm not particularly wise. I'm just able to see a few things a little differently than other people, but in the way I live my life, and I've been more blessed than wise, and made a few good calls, and been some humble enough to recognize how much good fortune has played a part in my role as compared to, any particular brilliance of my own. But okay, so Newton Minow, it was just a mean thing to say, and he meant it as essentially a criticism that of the middle class and of television that the middle class liked, that it was, pablum, that it was, empty of intellectual rigor, that sort of thing. Just think of some Harvard professor. You're probably too young to remember that there used to be a kind of eyeglass that was cut off in half because uh, they hadn't they were reading glasses, and they hadn't yet invented had invented. People weren't using bifocals as frequently as they are now. So a lot of intellectuals would wear reading glasses that were, cut off here in the half, and they'd look down their nose to see above the reading glasses, and they'd raise their head up to use the reading glasses. So a guy looking down his nose at you was for real. It was literal. It meant that he was holding you in disdain, almost in contempt. And, so that's where Newton Minow was. I mean, he was essentially describing a great disdain for the intellectual qualities of the vast majority of Americans who watch TV, which he considered a vast wasteland. Um, so is the content of television intellectually stimulating? Well, a lot of it's not. Some of it's good storytelling. Some of it is good entertainment. Some of it is, um, material that it just doesn't appeal to me. But I've learned with kind of recently, really, um, not to say and and wallow in statements that are critical about people who would watch these sorts of shows. They're watching different TV than I'm interested in, um, and it's easy to to crap on them, but it's wrong. And so I try to recognize that behavior on my own part and deal with it. Um, There's two more examples from important people, but they're going to take too much time to give treatment to. And I got a lot more stuff I've prepared, and I knew it was going to be days and days of material. Um, it just deserves the build out. And I want to talk about H.L. Mencken. I want to talk about President Obama, and I want to talk about Hillary Clinton. Um, President Obama used the phrase people clinging to their guns and Bibles, and that was an example of what we're talking about, of a failure to appreciate nature's wisdom. And Hillary used the phrase the deplorables, another good example of what we're talking about. And H.L. Mencken used an invented word that was intended to make the word bourgeoisie even more insulting, and he called it the bourgeoisie, meaning that the great majority of Americans are very unintelligent boobs. And he was a complicated man who edited a magazine that was the first magazine edited by white people to publish works by black writers, including Langston Hughes. So he's complicated, but there's a lot to say about the general disdain he had as another example of how the Great Divide got made greater, and how hard it is to see how deeply ingrained in all of us is this contribution from each of us towards widening the Great Divide and maintaining it. Okay, so that's enough for today. More tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye.